Hey everyone, it's Dr. Ramani. So here's a question for you. How many of you came out of a grandiose narcissistic relationship, didn't wait the year, and rebounded or found that the next person you got into a relationship with was a vulnerable narcissistic person? How'd that work out for you? But how did it feel while you were in it? Let's talk a little bit about how you might miss seeing the signs of a vulnerable narcissist if you're coming out of a relationship with a grandiose one. So let's start this video by imagining a scenario, okay? A person, maybe the person was you, was in a relationship with an arrogant, grandiose, pretentious, preening, charismatic, look at me, center of attention, narcissistic person. It was a relationship that was fireworks and love bombing at the beginning, and then deteriorated into devaluation, gaslighting, and all the rest of it. What seemed like a big, shiny relationship devolved into a one-way road of narcissistic supply. And having to endure the world thinking that this person, that you, the person being in the relationship, had it made for being in a relationship with someone who is so fabulous. You're in the relationship, it was one betrayal too many. Or maybe the grandiose narcissistic person traded you in, or traded the person who they were in that relationship in, for a younger, shinier person. So then that person, who, again, maybe you in that relationship, having again not taken the year off like I wish people would do, is back out there, grieving the grandiose narcissistic relationship, trying to get over it, trying to break through the rumination. Maybe you didn't really do the deep dive into learning about the entire tapestry of narcissism and only had that unidimensional take of narcissism as grandiosity and charm and charisma, or maybe you didn't learn about it at all. So then when you meet someone who's more quiet, maybe even a little socially awkward, someone where in their life not everything's going their way, and maybe they're even willing to be a little vulnerable about it. They're sharing about how it has been hard, that things aren't going their way. That's different, right? That seems vulnerable. That's in the right direction. You might feel like, oh, this new person just needs to be loved. And as you hear about this new person in your life, you may try to rescue them. You might find that this person doesn't have everything go their way. Everything's not handed to them. And instead, this new person you're in a relationship with is struggling. And so you lean in. You offer to introduce them to new people who you believe could be useful for them. You may even take them on a vacation to lift their spirits. This new person you're in a relationship with shares feelings, lots of feelings, anxiety and sadness and vulnerability. And they share how difficult their family life might have been. Now, this is very different from the grandiose narcissistic person who shared no vulnerable feelings and may have been yammering on about how great their family is. You may think you found someone great. This new person isn't grandiose and entitled. They don't want to go to flashy places. They don't want to be the center of attention. In fact, they don't even feel comfortable in flashy new places. This new person isn't shady on social media or flirting with your friends. What a relief! How refreshing! No, this person does complain a lot about the people at his job or at their job, and they often feel like they're underappreciated, but I don't know, maybe they are, and they're able to talk in terms of feelings. That's better than that grandiose, superficial airbag. This new person doesn't always listen to me. But then this new person said to me, whoa, you have it all figured out. Your career's great. I know I'm the one who's always complaining. That might seem like insight to you if you're in this relationship. A little more time passes in the relationship, more complaining, no listening, lots of negative feelings. It starts feeling heavy. The new person you're in this relationship with doesn't want to spend time with your friends. It's too hard for them, they say, to summon up a fake smile. You go without me. And your life with this new person gets more and more narrow. You know how you go from a very hot, muggy day into a really air-conditioned building that initially it feels so refreshing and cooling, but then after an hour or so you are freezing? That, in some ways, is the experience of going from a grandiose to a vulnerable narcissistic relationship. Now, this video is based on someone sending in a question about this. But the idea that this new relationship with a vulnerable narcissistic person, this person in their question said it felt wonderful and fantastic. I'm guessing until it didn't. But why did it feel so good initially? If you had to adjust to being in a relationship with the center of attention, superficial, inappropriate person, that relationship didn't feel good. In pretty short order, a relationship with a grandiose narcissistic person can feel really gross. And you realize that once you scrape that shiny gold coating off the top, there's just rusty metal underneath. So then, why would a vulnerable narcissistic person end up feeling like a correction? Because during the early get acquainted phase, a vulnerable narcissistic person is not attention-seeking, may even seem humble, quiet, shy, will share emotion and feelings, be vulnerable, and definitely won't sound traditionally arrogant. They won't seem attention-seeking in the traditional sense, so you may not feel as though they have loose boundaries or behave in a manner that feels uncomfortable. After being cheated on, betrayed, ignored, this can be very seductive. It may seem that they are listening to you because they aren't interrupting you or cutting you off in the same way a grandiose narcissistic person would. People also feel useful in relationships with vulnerable narcissistic people. Whereas the grandiose narcissistic person may be more contemptuous of your help, feeling that they have it all figured out, a vulnerable narcissistic person is a bottomless pit of helpability. You may find that you can almost turn them into your project. So if you are a rescuer or a fixer by nature, a vulnerable narcissistic person may initially seem like almost like a gratifying project. And that sort of helping someone in that kind of tight way can be experienced as closeness and intimacy. So in the midst of this sort of very new and different experience, you may slowly miss that this relationship is actually the same one-way street. Because the cracks you may miss early is that they really aren't listening to you, though it seems like they are. That these emotions that they're always sharing are always negative and nothing ever goes right for them. You may also see other cracks starting to show. If you're succeeding, for example, and they are not, they may get a little prickly. They may not ask follow-up questions or respond with, they might say things like, well, what do you want me to say? You're great. You do great, okay? You can start feeling dismissive. But because the relationship with a vulnerable narcissistic person is such a marked contrast to your grandiose relationship, you may miss some of the early cracks and signs. You may just simply be relieved to be with someone who isn't superficial. You may think that the vulnerable narcissistic person wants to nest and just stay close to home and get to know you and not get lost in socializing with lots of other people, whereas the grandiose narcissistic person always needed a crowd around them. There's really almost no space for you, or your voice got lost in those others. But there will be that day that the vulnerable narcissistic person's malcontentedness will feel tiresome. The hangdog, resentful, sullen, almost paranoid vibe will start to burn you down. If infidelity and cheating is a fear of yours from the grandiose relationship, a vulnerable narcissistic person may be very appealing because they may be less likely to do so, not necessarily because they have a stronger moral compass. But it takes work to go out there and be charming and lie and draw someone else into their lives. Vulnerable narcissistic people need a different kind of supply than you'd find from someone you're flirting with. And in a way, them having their victimhood reinforced is their supply. But if you were cheated on and the vulnerable narcissistic person who comes around is not doing anything that even feels like it's in that ballpark, that can feel fantastic. You may actually, for a long time, in a relationship with a vulnerable narcissistic person think that maybe they're just depressed or socially anxious. And they may be. You may even try to gently encourage them to seek out therapy, or make the mistake of trying to be a de facto therapist for them. But even if they are depressed, and even if that depression is treated, what is left is a person who will still believe that the world is deeply unfair to them, and that everyone's out to get them, and nothing is fair to them. And as a relationship goes on, you may slowly find that you hide yourself, your accomplishments, your joys, because the vulnerable narcissist either rains on your parade, or you leave all your encounters with them feeling guilty. With time, if you stay in this relationship with a vulnerable narcissist, the attacks against you will accelerate, and you will be one of the many people out there that they believe are contributing to their misery. It'll be that you don't believe in them enough, you don't support them enough, everything comes easy to you. This kind of relationship may go on for a long time, and in fact, you may feel as though you are the one who is not supportive enough or nice enough in the wake of all the terrible problems that they are having. But the heaviness, the cheap shots, the victimhood, the sense that you and the world owe them something, it will wear you out in a very different way than betrayal ever would. It's a different kind of hurt. I'm not saying one's better or worse, it's just different. Again, a gentle reminder. This question brought it up again. Give yourself time, a lot of time, like a year time, to get solid in you again. Is it possible that you will still be vulnerable to a vulnerable narcissistic person even after a year? Sure. The warning signs and the feelings are different. But a little time for you may also be a wake-up to not feel that doing is what a relationship is about. But this is part of the why that the boomerang from a grandiose to a vulnerable narcissistic person can be so seductive. But ultimately, all of it is just a variation on a theme. And as a reminder, after listening to this video, if you are interested in doing a deeper dive into healing from all kinds of narcissistic relationship, grandiose, vulnerable, any kind you can think of, check out the link in the video description to pre-order my new book, It's Not You, coming out in February, or sign up for my monthly healing program, also in the video description. There's resources out there. You do not need to suffer with this alone. Thanks again.